Yeah, so Tracy, what a great book. And I just love the way it's filled with stories and examples and just real life, raw pain and struggle and dreams that we all have to build these autonomous connections. So tell us, why do you think autonomous, beautiful, deep connections are something we all want, but yet we struggle with this? Why do you think, in your experience, that people struggle so much with this?
Oh, such a good place for us to start, because I know that you and I work every single day teaching our clients, teaching our communities how to do this. And it is so challenging for us. And our sense of self is that it's built on so many micro experiences that we have in our earliest relationships. Very early on, we understand, we get messages, whether it's said explicitly to us or whether it's implicit, and whether our caregivers do something or they don't do something. We get all of these messages about who we are in the sense of our lovability and our worthiness, but then also in the sense of who other people are in terms of their safety, dependability, and reliability. And all of these micro moments, and I know you talk about this as well, is in the sense that they become our unconscious roadmaps for how we show up in our relationships. And it's these messages that lead us to struggle with building that autonomous connection. Those messages that sound like, and we've all heard these in some way: you make mommy sad. You're making me angry. You just need to be a good girl, behave, push down those feelings, right? When no one's necessarily saying to children, push your feelings down, but we often grow up hearing that message of, it's fine, you're okay, move on. And what we're doing as children in our earliest relationships is we're trying to separate and to build that sense of individuation of, I am me and you are you, and we're both okay. But those messages come in and stop us from doing that.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And you've explained this so beautifully in this book. I didn't sign up for this. I really love the stories you tell because, like you said, mommy said to us, you make me sad, or we see that we've disappointed dad. I think it's that intense fusion from our parents, right? Our parents are so enmeshed with us that it's so hard to create connection and sovereignty and autonomy. And I think as parents, we see that with our children. We so want them to fly, but yet we're so scared to let go of control. And then we see that in our couple, right? And you explained that so well, that you create that parallel between our children and our partners, and how the same issues are coming up for everybody. So let's talk about interdependence, because every child wants independence, but they also want connection. And that word falls beautifully into the rubric of interdependence, right? The mix between autonomy and independence and connection is interdependence. So how do you define interdependence?
Let's start with what it's not, because I think that's always a really good place to go to. Interdependence is not codependency. It's not the losing of ourself. When we're codependent, or I love the word emotionally fused, when we're fused with another person, we lose that sense of self. We lose the I that says, I love pizza. I don't want tacos for dinner tonight. The I that says, this isn't going to be okay for me. The I that gives up ourselves because our partner's in a bad mood. I just had this experience with a girlfriend yesterday where she was telling me her partner was in a bad mood. She's like, I'm okay, right? I'm okay for my partner to be in a bad mood. I don't have to go and fix it. And it's that reminder that you can have both. Two things can be happening in a relationship. So codependency is we lose ourselves. But then what we love to do as humans is we love to find another way to deal with that tension between independence and connection. And the way we try to deal with it then is we go into that hyper independence. that saying to another person, those are your feelings, you go deal with them. I'm not responsible for them. These are my boundaries. You must respect them, right? We get stuck in that rigidity of wanting to only be in the self. And that also doesn't feel good in the long run. So interdependence is finding a way to deal with the tension that comes up with both independence and connection. And it's through this process of differentiation. And differentiation is this ability to understand, to make sense of, to be aware of, and then to communicate our own thoughts, feelings, opinions, desires, wishes, and values. And not only can we do it from the sense of I, but if we're doing it for ourselves, this is the tricky piece of the romantic relationship, but also with our children, we have to be willing to have them do it with us and to make space to hear their sense of I and their differentiation.
Oh my goodness. This is like the whole of life's work, right?
Yeah.
How do we stay interdependent? How do we stay grounded in our sense of autonomy and our alignment, but also not do what you said, this kind of this new age kind of, disconnected, rigid independence. Like that's you do you, I'm going to do me, because that doesn't create this we-ness, this oneness. And if we want the team to win, right, you have to kind of give up your own paranoid obsession with your own needs being met, right? The team's need has to be met. And that's, I think, the hardest thing for couples, to trust that you are now part of a team and you want the we to win. It's not about you winning or your ego winning or that person winning. It's about the team winning. And that takes a real healthy sense of self, don't you think? Like to allow the team to win, but without allowing yourself to be suffocated in the team.
I think that is so hard for us to
So
do.
hard.
And because we see that of the generational patterns of you should be a good girl, you should keep pleasing me now that I'm a parent and an adult, and then you should still do this generation after generation until at some point we say, this isn't working anymore. I don't feel good. I want something different in my relationship.
Yep. Why did you call the book I Didn't Sign Up for This? Tell us, what was the inspiration?
The inspiration was from all of the clients that I was sitting in front of. And I almost had to step back a little bit and say, am I really hearing this from every client? It's not every single one, but clients were continuing to come in and to say, this relationship is no longer the one that I signed up for. And of course, that comes into question of, so what had you hoped for? What were those expectations of a long-term relationship? And then how do we start building a relationship where you're both showing up consciously and making choices for the self and the other and looking at the we? And then the other piece, Dr. Shefali, that really showed up for me was the moment where I found myself saying the same thing as my clients, feeling like I had lost my identity, feeling this sense of resentment in my own marriage, saying, I didn't sign up for this.
Yep. You feel so duped because your fantasies of what you thought it would be don't come true. I love that you've separated the book into aware, acknowledge, and align. Aware, acknowledge, and align. And for aware, you write, as humans, we look for a beginning, a middle, and an end when it comes to stories, right? So we're always looking for things to make sense, but we are not aware of our own story when we come into a couple. But tell us why you separated it into aware, acknowledge, and align.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really wanted to give readers this sense of what it means to do this work and what we need to do within ourselves. And so we can't move anywhere without an awareness of what's actually happening for ourselves. And that is that first step within differentiation as well, is for me to understand, why am I feeling not necessarily why, but what is happening in this moment for me? oh, when my partner comes home in a bad mood, I feel the tension in my jaw and the shortness of my breath. And I feel like I want to do all the things. And so that awareness piece is so important. We can't do anything without that awareness. And then acknowledge that piece came in is really being able to see, how is it that I show up in a relationship? And you and I both know this, that people come to our work and the first thing they do is they say they need to change. They should be different. They should give me everything that I need. And I need this. And so it's my partner's job to give this to me. And so that acknowledge section is really about seeing how we contribute to the dynamic and the pattern that's happening. And then align is that last piece of being able to make the conscious choice. Choose wisely, choose what it is that you need. And part of that, as you can see through the chapters, is part of that work for us is sometimes saying, my husband isn't going to give me everything that I need. And I need to start giving this to myself. And I can't change the other person. And can I, and you and I have talked about this before, can I grieve that I had hoped this person would fill this bucket for me? Can I then start giving it to myself? So how do I align within myself so that we could be different in our relationship?
Yeah, it's so hard to know, what is healthy and what is codependent, what is enmeshed. And I think the answer, because it'll always be murky, there's no clarity in terms of like a clear sign. But I think people in couples need to know that part of the growth that can occur in a couple is this dance of figuring out, how do I make my own self content, happy, joyful, peaceful, harmonious? And then what can I expect from the relationship? But I think, and I think you'll agree, is that the starting point is always your own inner work. You have to be the blossoming garden for your own self at all times, bearing fruit for your own self. And then, at least because you're a little bit more full and complete, you can enter the relationship and then at least not see the other only through hunger, craving, lack, neediness, right? So would you agree that that's kind of the fountainhead, is the inner work?
Yes. Although we don't want to hear that at the start, right? We want to
No.
come and say, if they were different, if they changed, then we could be different. But the foundation, the core of what we're doing is within the self.
Yep.
And you talk about that in your work as well, in all of your books, where it's, us as the parent to find ourselves as the good enough parent, as worthy for us in our relationships in all areas of our life. It has to start within the self. It's hard work.
Yeah, I love in the book, you talk about these attachment patterns, and I love that you made it so simple through these stories. So on page 192, you talk about this couple and you write, as I explained to Megan and Melissa, I look at people pleasing from an attachment perspective. So you're teaching us how to look at our patterns, but from a core attachment background and a place to understand. You say, when a parent or authority figure is emotionally aggressive or neglectful of our needs, we learn to do things that make them happy. So then this creates a false sense of security in times of distress by making us feel safe, soothed, and seen. And that's Dan Siegel's 3 core needs, right? Safe, soothed, and seen. I think he has 5, maybe.
4.
But 4, what's the 4th
4.
one? Safe, soothed, seen, significant.
Secure. No, secure.
Secure. Okay,
He
great.
defines it as secure. Yeah.
Great. But we're only being seen, safe, soothed. We're only getting these needs met when we are people pleasing. So, so many of us have many patterns, right? So people pleasing is one of them. Hyper rigid individualism and autonomy is another one. And again, what you're showing us here is that we created these patterns because we got our basic needs met, but we really didn't get our basic needs met because we were in the ego, right? I talk about it as an ego mask. We were wearing the mask to get our needs met. So how do you help people understand that's a coping pattern? That is you in a cycle of dysfunction. And how do couples typically receive that?
Yes. Oh, so working from an emotionally focused perspective, I like to go into that core attachment need and longing that's showing up for them in those moments and being able to see what is it that you're doing right here. Let's connect this need and longing, the need to be seen, the need to be validated. Let's connect that to the behavior that you're doing. And then can we start even seeing each other's behaviors through that lens of, oh, when you come to me angry and upset and telling me I never help out, that's actually stemming from something deeper inside of you that is saying, see me, I need you, I need to connect with you. We know it's not the dishes or the sausages that we're fighting about. We're fighting from that child place, from that place of longing and need. And so
Yeah.
framing it very much as, could I look at what you're doing here in this moment from that attachment perspective? This is how you step into the dance to flag me or to
Yes.
signal to me that something is off. And once
Yes.
we can start seeing it that way, I think we can then almost, it is almost like taking off that mask, right? Of being able to say, my partner's not coming at me because they're angry at me or I'm not enough, right? Because that's often the cycle. One partner says, am I important? Do I matter to you? Where the other, this is in heterosexual relationships, the man often comes in saying, am I adequate? Or am I a failure? I'm always failing you. And so then we can start seeing those behaviors as this is how you're trying to reach me. But if you could come to me and say you don't feel good enough, or staying with the important piece, come to me in that space of saying, I miss you. I want to connect with you. I need to know that you're here. Then we could start having a completely different conversation.
Right. So when uh, the man, say the husband, is upset that the
Mhm.
woman forgot something important, he'll say, I can't believe you forgot this, and you're so forgetful, and you're such a moron, and you're just like your mother. Okay.
Ooh.
But really what he needs to say is, it really hurt my feelings that you forgot about me. And
Yeah.
similarly for the woman, it's so easy to say, you're so irresponsible, you're never around, you don't care about us. And instead of just saying, I really miss you, I need you. Why is it so hard to go down, right? We wear the mask of survivor because I think that mask makes us
Yeah.
feel in control. We externalize the pain, we blame, but we never get our needs met, really, ever. I found this in my own relationship. Go to the need. What is the need? Don't disguise it in blame, shame, guilt, and anger, guilt tripping and anger. Go to the need. But that's so vulnerable making, to say, I need you. I'm feeling like a 5-year-old. I'm feeling insecure. I feel you don't love me. Geez, that is like so vulnerable making. And that's the key, right? We're so
Yeah.
distrustful because way back when, right, when we were vulnerable, we didn't get our needs met. So now being vulnerable and going to the core. So instead of saying, why don't you ever do the dishes? You have to say, I'm feeling like I'm the only one who's carrying the burden, and it's a lot to carry, right? How do you take people to that place of vulnerability? Because you do it beautifully in the book.
I received a message from someone yesterday saying they were in tears after reading how Emily and Matt ended. We didn't end therapy officially, but how the last chapter ends. And of course, if this is this repeating stuck cycle for people, find support. You don't have to keep doing this on your own. But that one piece of where to start is to start within that deeper vulnerability. And also for us to acknowledge we're not going to get the need met the first time. And this happens in therapy because one client will say to their partner, I need you. Let's see, I'll take Emily and Matt. I need to know that I'm important to you. I need to know that I'm really important to you. And the other person distrusts it and they miss it. And they might still show up with their ego mask on and say, well, she's just saying it this way in therapy because you're here, Dr. Tracy. This isn't really what she's going to do at home. So we mistrust the expression at first, which is a reminder to us that these patterns, even in your relationship, have been there since early on. And it's going to take repeated times of you stepping into that vulnerability and saying to your partner, I miss you. I miss us. I need to know, I need us to have time together so that I can have a bit of that filled up for me too. But your partner might miss it the first time. So you got to go back again.
Right. So look at the courage it takes. And that's why I think many of us get into spiraling dysfunctional loops, because I come to you with a bid, right?
Yes.
A bid for attention, a bid for my need being met. And now you've missed it. I mean, I'm going to feel rejected, right? It takes a lot to give the benefit of doubt to the other, to go then their inner child, then their ego. And I'm willing to forsake my ego and my inner child needs right now to stay in peace and alignment, because that just spirals us
Right.
into our
Yeah.
inner need.
There's something so cool that I worked with recently in a session, and it was with an individual, and she was sharing a story in a relationship, and we had broken it down in terms of what part of her showed up there. And we were able to say, this is the child part of me. This is the child part that's just begging for her parents to pay attention to her, that just needs that, hey, we see you. Yes, you're having a hard time. Your feelings matter in all of the family chaos that we're experiencing. We see you. We get it. What do we need to do here? How can we support each other? So in this moment as an adult now in this relationship, that child part shows up. And it was so powerful for us in session to imagine, could you almost turn back and say, hey, child part, hey, child Tracy, I see you. I know that this is where you want to come and you want to fight and you want to protest. And just for you to know, I've got this. I'm here. I can show up and protect you. And I'm going to now ask for what it is that I need. We get to do that as adults now. But that child part really needs that soothing.
Yep. And I think then once you've taken care of your child part and acknowledged it, like you talk in the book, then when you make your bid and then it gets rejected, it's still going to be better than if you had not acknowledged it. But now you get to do it again, or you get to make choices.
Yeah.
You get to say, listen, I've taken care of my inner child. I'm not acting in ego. I'm showing up in presence. I made my bid beautifully. The person cannot meet me. Now you have choices. Okay, the person cannot meet me because they're not able to. And now what can I do about it? And I always say you have three choices. You can stay, you can accept it, or you can leave. But at least you've taken care of your inner self and not vomited over the relationship. So let me ask you, how often do you see people actually being able to work through their trauma? And what is the biggest struggle that people get stuck on in trauma work?
I was actually just going to touch on that piece right there, which I think is the acceptance piece of, I need to acknowledge that my partner can't give that to me. And that, I think, is some of the hardest work that we have to do, because I have to then say, these things happened to me. I had this experience. They don't have to define me and who I am today. And I have to be willing to withstand, again, it's that tension in the relationship that I'm not going to get everything that I need. And that's a real hang up, because sometimes people will say, I am accepting this about this person, but then the pressure of not really accepting it just oozes out of that, right? The pressure of, well, maybe if you were different, or maybe if we had more sex, or maybe if you helped more or you validated me more. There's that pressure that's still coming within the self because we haven't fully accepted it. I see that's where people really get hung up when it comes to dealing with our own stuff.
Yeah. So accepting that the other cannot, is not able to.
Yes.
Because you see, in a way, when we get into these relationships, so great is our childlike fantasy that we will be rescued, that we will be saved, that we're marrying the most ultimate person who will just be our greatest mother and father that we never had. Then when this person reduces themselves, or you get to see that they're just mere mortals, and if anything, they have loads of trauma, maybe more than yours,
Mhm.
it's such a devastation because you didn't get it. What you signed up for
You did
was,
sign up for
you
it.
didn't sign up for this, taking care of somebody else's child. You're like, I wanted to be rescued. I wanted to be the princess. I wanted mommy and daddy. Now you want mommy and daddy. So I always say it's the twin beggar syndrome. Like
Yeah.
we're both beggars and trying to make this work. But actually, for the most part, most relationships are a working through and working out of trauma. And then if you're very lucky and you've healed enough, you may then stumble upon, in the same relationship or another, a more integrated, wholesome couple. But even that couple will have issues. There's just no couple that doesn't have issues. Am I right?
Oh, I love that you said that. Yes, because I think that at the foundation of our relationship is something that we all need to acknowledge and accept, that there is no couple out there. And we see that through the research as well. There are no couples out there that do not have these hard moments. How do we unwire or rewire these previous histories? We just don't get to erase it and be a blank slate. That is not something that we get to do as humans. And it's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard
It's
work.
hard because you are engaging, I always say, with other people's children. Like,
Mm,
do we understand what that is? Like, we think, oh, we're marrying Matt and we're marrying Sam and we're marrying, Boris. No, you're not. You're marrying some other couple's children, and they're probably unconsciously raised. So you're taking that on now. And
yes.
are you willing to do that? And I think when we get married, we dream of this lilac, filled wedding and roses, and we're not realistic that we are marrying pain and unprocessed trauma. Are we willing to sign up for that? Right? That's what you're
Yeah.
signing up for. You're not signing up for the wedding.
Right. And that I know you and I both agree on this, is that's what we miss when it comes to building healthy relationships. Is we miss this understanding, this conversation, and even the skills of how we can actually do this work to then be
Yes.
able to say, this isn't the wedding. This isn't about the dress and the outfit and the picture and the party. Those things are great. Maybe if that's what you want or not want, that's okay too. But it's the, how do we actually live day to day with our child parts that have these needs that require us to be vulnerable and messy and maybe be rejected? How do we do that every single day, moment to moment? And we know, I've seen this with the couples that I've worked with, that it's the same issue that shows up again and again and again. It's not because they're faulty or they're not doing the work. It's because this is the work that we have to do in our life.
100%. So when couples kind of find themselves after a few years really angry and resentful,
Mm.
frustrated, how could you help us understand that it's symbolizing something? And what is that symbolizing?
Yes. When anger and resentment show up in our relationships, I often view that as coming from some kind of unmet need that has either been expressed or has maybe been expressed in some way, maybe a good way, an effective way, maybe not. That's not being met in the relationship. And yet in our society, we teach people, both men and women, but especially women, don't be angry. Don't be resentful. Those aren't nice emotions. And yet, when we teach people not to feel these emotions, then we lose our ability to connect it to what it is that we need. And so, no wonder people show up angry and resentful, because they're pushing down all kinds of things that they are missing and needing in their relationship. And so, and we don't have to get into the debate about whether anger is a primary or secondary emotion. We can say that it's both. They tell us important things, but it's that piece of asking ourselves, I am feeling this. What do I need? What do I
Yeah.
need to start giving to myself first? And that can be a really hard and uncomfortable space to step into.
Yep. What about people, and not everybody has this, but some people have a very incurable, never-ending shame spiral. So maybe first tell us, what is a shame spiral? What is shame?
Mm.
How does shame play a role in the breakdown of a relationship?
Yes. Shame is that feeling. It's not that I've done something bad. It's that I am bad. I am unworthy. I'm not good enough. And the way I understand shame in a relationship is the breaking of the bridge that connects us. And it's like putting up the curtains, putting us in the dark. And when I see it in the couple relationship, this classic example that I always come back to, I remember working with this couple where she was finally able to express what she needed in a way, all of the skills, right? Check mark of I feel, I need, please help, those things. And she would say it in such a way. And then he would say to her, I'm such a bad partner. I can never get it right. I'm failing
Right.
all of the time. I don't even know why you're with me. And in that moment, he's taking her bid, her reaching for him, and he's breaking it. And I like to call it like you're rolling out into shame. And that's what the spiral sounds like, is anytime your partner gives you feedback or requests for something, it's not that you say, I see you as a separate, I see that there's something that you need, and I can look at that and be curious and try to understand it and see how I can do it. Instead, it's like you're just sucked into this vortex of, I'm so bad and unworthy. How could you even be with me? And truly,
Right.
in the moment in session, I would see her look at him and then look at me, and then we would lose her need, because then she'd be like, she would get wrapped up into, no, I'm not saying that. You are good. You're a good partner. How do I get you to, it's like pulling him out of the hole. Like, come on,
Right.
come back here to be with me.
Right. That's so hard, Tracy.
Yes.
So then,
So
well, how
it's
do
just
we?
breaking.
Yeah. So,
Yes.
so do you tell that the healthier one to kind of pause and then work with the shame spiral person?
Mm-hmm. It depends. In session then with her, because she's expressing this need from a place of emotional vulnerability, I help him label the shame spiral, and that can be so important. So for people who are listening, practice noticing it. You don't have to do anything with it in that moment. Just notice, ooh, I really want to tell myself that I'm such a bad partner in this moment. I'm not going to do that, but I just need to tell you that's immediately where I went when you're talking to me right now.
Mm-hmm.
In that moment in session, what I often say is I ask them, can you imagine holding that shame and passing it to me so I can hold it for you? We'll work
Mm.
with the shame part of you. We want you to feel like you're good enough. We don't want you to spiral down into the dark hole. But right here in this moment, can you park the shame part of you and then turn to your partner and see what she's asking, and to acknowledge and to be in the we part right here, right? Because rolling into shame goes into I and disconnects us.
Wow, I like that. So, a therapy space allows for things to be parked and you can give it to the therapist. I love that. So
Yeah.
let's talk about the big, big, big boundaries. How do we know when to compromise? So I came from India. So my conditioning was all about, you should compromise. Marriage is compromise. Relationships are compromise, compromise, compromise. But as a result, I saw many Indian women have terrible boundaries. But we
Right.
also, like we've talked about, don't want to be rigid and unyielding. We don't want the boundary to be a wall. We want it to be a beautiful boundary. So talk
Mhm.
to us about, and I know there's no perfect science, but the difference between flexibility and compromise, and then boundaries, and how firm should a boundary be, and how do you know what's healthy?
Oh, and I would love to hear how you work with this as well, because it's tricky and it really depends. And I like to ask people to come back into what they find meaningful, what's really important to them. The reality is we don't get to hold boundaries on every single thing in our relationship. Otherwise, that's the hyper independence and that's the I think of this in terms of artwork. My husband and I will never fully agree on artwork. I will always like something different than him. And so sometimes I choose what is going to be in our living room and he's going to choose what's going to be in our dining room. And the question though is, how important is this that I need to really hold this boundary. And of course, when we come back to things like safety, security, feeling soothed, feeling seen, those are core things that we need in our relationship. So when it comes to that boundary of, I need you to be a safe place for me in our relationship, that might be something that's non-negotiable, because we don't want the disrespect and someone to be telling us it's all our fault, or telling us to suck it up and that you're too sensitive, all of those things, right? So, and that is a value. That's something that's really important. So again, it depends on what that is. But I think the other piece is, it depends on what the boundary is. And it also depends on the relationship with that person. So if we're talking about the romantic relationship, or are we talking about a relationship with an in-law or with a coworker or a friend, what does that look like? And who is it on the other end? Are they someone that can receive the boundary, or is it because it's part of my values, I have to figure out maybe even a self boundary in that moment? Where is it coming from? Who is it with?
Right. Because sometimes, you know, so say you're trying to create a boundary with your mother-in-law, and you've told her, you know, no more gifts, don't get any more gifts for the children, or no more candy. And she just violates it all the time. Right. So it's really hard, because you have to really ask yourself, what's more important? Is the relationship more important, or that boundary? And it's really checking in with yourself to ask yourself, how important is this for me? And then own it. And you can't say it's important for you and then don't do anything about it, or say it's not important for you, but then get upset about it, right? So you have to really, I think, self-search to ask yourself, why is this boundary important? What does it mean to me? And how do I need to execute it? Do I need to execute it every time? You know, and I think this is the mistake. People think a boundary is like a wall.
Yes.
A boundary is dynamic. You know, you know, under those circumstances, you can joke with me like that. Under these circumstances, hell no.
Right.
It's so contextual.
Yes. Yes.
And I think people get scared of being fluid with boundaries. Go ahead.
Yes, because that is my boundary okay? We're constantly looking for that. They're upset that I said, I don't want to talk about our sleep choices or our feeding choices with our baby. So maybe my boundary is wrong, which then comes back into we need to be centered in ourselves, knowing that what we're saying in that moment is okay, and that others are going to be upset and have a reaction to our boundary. But just because you say it one way at one time doesn't mean that 2 years later, you're still not wanting to talk about sleep and food with baby, whatever that looks like, right? There is this sense of fluidity. You are allowed to change and to flex. And actually, we know flexibility is one of the most important things to be mentally well.
Yeah. Yep. I think one of the things that stood out in the book that kept coming up, and I've seen it in my own life, is the biggest mistake that we make in relationships is we don't tap into what we're feeling right now and talk from a feeling place, right? And because we don't, now we're in a panic, right? So mother-in-law says, oh, I'm getting candy. And instead of saying, no, that doesn't make me comfortable, I need a pause, I need to think about it, we either react too strongly or we don't react, and then we get resentful, right? When we miss the moment, and I think that's how resentment builds up. Resentment is unprocessed feelings. And that's why I tell couples this whole idea of, you know, go to sleep happy. I don't know how you feel about that. Tell me. I won't say, you go first.
Go to sleep connected with the desire that we're in this together. Don't go to sleep happy. I don't know how that exists, because at the end of the night, when your nervous systems are both offline and you are disagreeing, you can't do that. It's not possible when you're two separate people. So that, and I'm pretty sure that was said at our wedding as well, is remember, the best advice that we can give you is never go to bed angry, right? That's
right. Because it's unrealistic. And I think in our desire to be happy and not be angry and like keep the facade of a happy family, we then don't process. And till something is processed, I think people don't have enough of a high regard for how it will show up over and over again. Rather go to sleep unhappy for 30 days than for the shit to continue for 30 years, right? Like process the shit, like process it,
Yes.
process it, check in with yourself. Am I done? And if I'm not done, don't be done then don't pretend you're done, because
Right.
it'll show up in resentment and scorn and contempt and all the things that John Gottman talks about that are the precursors to a divorce. It's unprocessed, unhealed damage that will really underpin the relationship. Better to have a break in the moment than a constant erosion over time. You know, people are so afraid of that break. That's why we don't go for it. But what we do is we bury it, but then there's constant fluctuations and seismic earthquakes, tremors happening all throughout your relationship, which is not healthy either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, and then we end up feeling it and not being aligned, not feeling good moving forward. Yeah. There's a question here from Renee. And the question is, what will help the therapist to not feel frustrated when the usual suggestions on communication techniques isn't working? So just a little bit of it there. So the couple where one person has a spectrum diagnosis, the other has ADHD, PTSD. They've done a lot of work in therapy, but frustrated that the husband cannot and will not learn to try to communicate and not retreat. So for example, husband doesn't put down phone when wife is trying to have a discussion, which leads wife to pointing that out. Then husband becomes angry and resentful. Then wife tries to stay in mindful mind, but wants to yell. Pattern continues. That's a tricky one. Husband has mentioned therapy isn't helping. Wife is desperate for that sentence or suggestion from therapist to help. Don't you think it's so interesting? So how human, though, this is for a question from Renee, how human it is as a therapist to feel that frustration that they're not changing. You can imagine that if we feel that, how much they're feeling that in their cycle.
So how do you deal with that? I'll tell you after you say how I've dealt with it. But
how I would deal with that is that I would probably even reflect that sense of longing for them to be able to make those changes, and then also sitting in with them in that sense of frustration. And that in some ways that this is one of those positions where neither one of them are wanting to change how they're looking out at the other person. So then how do we go inwards then to see this? So what's happening for her in those moments when he doesn't want to put the phone down? So her as in the wife, and then what can she do? And then, because otherwise she goes into it, he just gets angry and resentful anyways. So that cycle's not working.
Yep. As a therapist, I think it's okay sometimes to take a side for a moment, because you know that you're going to take the other side. Yeah. And it's okay to say, you know, I can see that I'm feeling frustrated that you're not hearing me. And I think sometimes when you give voice and validity to people's experiences, that in itself is so healing. Just telling the wife, for example, you're not crazy, you know, I get it, but let's find a better way to get our needs met, right? Just that, because it validates her experience, allows her to feel, you know, in control again.
And then also too, so then is that even the right time to be communicating? And how can we as a couple renegotiate what that looks like? They both have a very real experience, of course. And goodness, you know this, how detrimental our phones are in our relationships, in our bedroom, how much they're hurting us and pulling us away from the other person. And if it's not the phones today, it was the TV before or whatever else was going on. One more question. So this one, Sharon says, I've done the inner work. How do I get my partner to do it as we're not progressing? And you and I have touched on this already, which is that piece of, can you sit in accepting that they're not there yet? And I say yet intentionally because they could be later on, but what would it be like to accept that you're doing this work and they aren't. What would
Right.
you?
And that you're doing this work for yourself, and you're not an evangelist partner, and you're not going to get to change them. And how do you release that desire and then make a choice, right?
Mhm.
We always have a choice, but like you and I always talk about, we have to accept their emotional quotient and where they are on their path. And if you can try, you make a bid, right? Highlight Dr. Tracy's book, you send them this video, you try.
Yeah.
But if you've made multiple bids and it's not working, at some point you have to then make a choice. Am I okay with where things are? And I can keep moving on in my journey, even though he's not or she's not. Or do I need to change something, or do I need to leave? But you cannot expect, just because you're on a journey of healing, that the other is with you, right? Tracy, you and I talk about something important. I loved how you put it when I was writing my book. You know, couples always come to us saying that, oh, we're not on the same page, and, you know, we're not a united front. And you have a really nice way of talking about it. So can you do that right now?
Oh, goodness. Yes. That is it takes one person to be doing this work, and how important it is that you, at the end of the day, gosh, I hope I'm saying it how I had said it before, but
It's
at the
okay.
end of the day, you put your head on the pillow and you ask yourself, did I show up in a way that's aligned for me?
Yes.
That we only get to choose and control for ourselves, and we can hope in a way. So when we're here and our partners are here, we can hope that they'll come and meet us, but we keep doing this work and we keep demonstrating and modeling what that is. And over time, they might meet you there. But again, with the parenting piece, with being on the same page, we need that one secure partner or person in the family doing this work. And over time, they'll come and meet you with that. And that's the concept of hanging in. You have to hang in, and it's uncomfortable and hard to do that.
Yeah, you want to hang in at least till you see the issues.
Yes.
Listen, every relationship has issues. Okay.
Mhm.
So why the one you're in, you might as well see your issues there and then decide. Now,
Yeah.
we're not talking about abusive situations.
No.
When it's abusive, you leave. You leave, you leave, you leave, you leave, you leave. So do not mistake us saying
Always.
you have to tolerate that.
Right.
But when it's not flagrantly abusive, but it's just a lot of mess and drama,
Yeah.
please know that you will have this mess and drama everywhere you go. So might as well, you're in it right now, might as well see your drama, try to go for therapy and heal yourself. Tracy, talk to us about the 4 C's. I love how you ended this book with the
Yes.
4 C's.
Yes.
And I think that's your specialty. So
And
break
that's
it down for us.
a great place for us to wrap up. And then also there's one question in there which says, is it going to feel easier for us at some point? What do you think? Do you think it gets easier when we're doing this work?
I think it could get easier. And yeah, I think it gets easier. Let me explain. I think as you do this work, 1000% it gets easier, but I'm not saying that it may end up looking like you will be together necessarily.
Yes.
It'll get
Or
easier
even where you think.
to see. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, or easier where you think you're going to end up, right? That
Yes.
it might look much different in terms of navigating time together, time apart, time with the kids, but it gets easier, but not necessarily where you thought you might end up, which can be a bit scary when it comes to doing this work.
Yeah, but again, our whole notion of marriage and relationships is a little bit off key because we've been given the wrong message. We've been given the message that a good relationship is based on longevity. I always say longevity rather than growth. We are here to be with each other, to discover ourselves. And I know that sounds selfish, but it's through the discovery of the self that you can allow the other to be who it is they are.
Yes.
So it's really not about how many years you clock in, how rich you are, how many children you have, how fancy they are. It's really about, am I getting back to myself? Am I getting more into my center than before? And that should be the barometer of a successful relationship. So talk to us about moving forward, the 4 C's.
Those 4 C's. The first C that I think is so important is to be able to have curiosity in our relationship. that curiosity, not just for the other person, but also for ourselves and the reaction that we have within ourselves when our partners do something. And that curiosity is the foundation. It helps us to be a good listener, to be a good question asker, to be someone who understands something. And we often have that in our early on days of the relationship, that we lose that because we start building expectations, assumptions, and perceptions about the other person. And once we're curious, what we can then do is the second C, which is compassion. Building compassion, not just for the other person, but also to know true, fierce self-compassion, to be able to say, oh, this was a moment where I messed up, where I didn't communicate in the way that I needed to, and I could hurt my partner's feelings. And then I can show back up into this relationship with that compassion to repair, heal, and move forward. And then we need collaboration, which prioritizes the we, which when you go to your in-laws and you go to your parents and you say, we are deciding this is what we want, where we are deciding together as decisions as a unit. And then that last C is connection, finding ways to continue to build those branches on your trees together that, and especially for parents too, when they feel so parallel, like ships crossing in the night, they're not together, but finding ways to continue to connect in any busy season, of being able to say, we don't have time for those deep date nights and weekend getaways in this season, but we can greet each other at the door. We can greet each other in the morning instead of our phones first. We can prioritize that time together and that pausing to respond to those bids from the other person moment to moment. My 4 C's.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. It's not easy, right? This is not supposed to be easy. Parenting is not easy. Life is not easy.
Yeah.
But the beautiful adventure of a couple, even if it's like you're fighting all the time, you don't see eye to eye, if you can allow, and that's what this book does for you, is to allow you to see why this is showing up in your life and what you can do about your healing. So take the healing out of the relationship, take the growth out of it, and then you can choose to leave or stay. But this book will show you how to glean the principles of growth for yourself, to look at your patterns. And you've made it so human with all these stories that I think people will feel validated, that they're not crazy, they're not alone, right, Tracy? I mean, as a therapist, and I feel this, that I see that nobody is this utopic, happy person. So how do you frame relationships and the power of relationships in our lives?
The relationships are a constant ebb and flow of teaching us what it means to love and to be loved, and that we are always unfolding something, and that there is a moment that we get to have each day where it says, am I choosing me or am I choosing us?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I love that. And both can sometimes exist together.
Yes,
right? And you want
absolutely.
your choosing of you, if it's as aligned with the us, then you're a win-win, right? Because the me is the us and the us and me. And when I win, we win. And when we win, I'm winning. Wow, that's an amazing relationship. Where when the we wins, you win. You're like, oh, I like this. Then I want to be on this team. And but I think all relationships are win-win, really. If you can take the lessons for your growth. So every day, write down, what did I learn today from this moment? Even if I fought all day and no one connected with me and I feel disconnected, what did I learn about myself? Oh, I at least learned I don't like to be talked to like this. Or I learned that this brings up my trauma wound. So if you decide to make the relationship a laboratory of growth for yourself, it's a win-win-win-win-win, right? So you have to choose it to be a win-win. You have to alchemize it to be a win-win situation. So even though you're complaining, I didn't sign up for this, through this beautiful book, and it's so simple, easy to read, clear and illustrative, Dr. Tracy will show you that you are capable of changing the mutations in your relationship to gold. You're capable of alchemizing mutation and disease to growth and beauty and empowerment. So it's a real book of practical wisdom, but also hope, redemption, forgiveness, connection. And I've really enjoyed reading it. I wrote, my quote is right there. No, I didn't realize. A must-read book for anyone in a relationship. I'm so honored to have supported this.
Thank you.
And you have beautiful, beautiful testimonials and beautiful examples. So go grab this book. And I can't wait to have you come to my summit, Evolve. You're coming in
Yes.
3 weeks.
I can't wait. In 2
So-
weeks, I can't wait. It's going to be a great time. I'm looking forward to it. My second time coming, so it's going to be fantastic.
So if people want to come to Evolve, it's my in-person masterclass on self-growth. Tracy's coming. It's in Atlanta. If you do want to come, I'm going to give everyone a code, Evolve20, for a 20% discount. You can go to my website and check it out. If you want to meet us in person, we will both be there. So Tracy, thank you for writing this amazing book, and go grab it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shefali. I'm so grateful for our conversation today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.